Welcome today on this beautiful, beautiful fall day here at Oatlands. I'm Lori Kimball. I'm the Senior Manager of Programs here at Oatlands. On behalf of our entire Oatlands team, we welcome you here today for this very special screening of the film Rhythms of the Land. This is this is day 2 of our Descendants Day weekend here at Oatlands. We started Descendants Day back in 2015. This is part of our Reclaim Your Story program here at Oatlands, which is telling a full story of this plantation, the people who had once been enslaved here after slavery, and of course meeting and connecting with descendants today. And we're just so thrilled to have to be able to screen this film, Rhythms of the Land, because many people who had been enslaved here and at the other Carter plantations went on to buy land and have farms of their own after freedom came. And so this is really an important story, and one about farming that we don't always talk about. What we're going to do is, as soon as I'm done talking, we are going to screen the film. And then when that's over, we're going to do a quick little transition up here, and Ellen Thaxton is going to interview Dr. Myers and take questions from you, the audience. So we're going to have some Q&A at the end of this film. The film is about an hour and 5 minutes. We're also live streaming it. As we've said in our promotional materials, we're not able to record it, so we're either seeing it today in person or via live stream. And our ability to do this is because we were funded by a grant from the National Trust for Historic Preservation's African American Cultural Heritage Action Fund grant. And so we're grateful that we received that and are able to do it today. If you haven't already discovered, we do have some refreshments over here to my left. Also, as part of our Descendants Day weekend, we launched our new, our revised Reclaim Your Story brochure. So for those of you who are here with us today, please, we have the brochure for you to pick up, and we have 2 bookmarks for you to pick up. And they feature the artwork of local artist Gertrude Evans, who did the artwork for our Reclaim Your Story exhibit that is out on. What we're going to do is go to a little Q&A with Dr. Myers, okay? And one thing, everyone, while we're making this transition, what I'd like to recognize is the descendants who were here for Descendants Weekend here at Oatlands. Can you either stand if you can, or just raise your hand so we can acknowledge you? Thank you for coming. I'm standing in front. Sorry.
Dr. Gail P. Myers is a cultural anthropologist, creator of the film Rhythm in the Land, and co-founder of the Farms to Grow Incorporated. In 1997, while pursuing her doctorate at The Ohio State University, she conducted her first interview with African American farmers. Her passion for Black farmers developed because of hearing stories of their land loss and struggles without recognition for their contributions to community health. For the last 23 years, she has been interviewing, researching, writing about, and filming stories of African American farmers. Dr. Myers is recognized as a subject matter expert on African American farming, and is on the faculty of the New School in the Food Studies program. So I am so glad to be here with you, and thank you very much for doing this important work.
It was an honor.
And one of the questions I have is, here we had a lot of Black farmers and a lot of landowners, and they also have been exploited by land speculators and corporations, and they lost their land for cheap. How has that affected our farmers, our Black farmers?
Wow, That's really the beginning and the end of the story when I began interviewing farmers before I started doing this documentary. But let me just say thank you to Lori for inviting us to come to bring this film. Thank you, Derek Clark, for introducing me to Lori. And I also want to recognize one of our co-producers who's back there, Jamila Sakira. She was very instrumental in getting this film out to you all. And so I'm just really honored to be here. And I did this film for everybody in this room, honestly. That's the reason that this film came to life. But you know, that was really why I got involved in this work, is because for my very first interview, a farmer that had lost land, he lost a farm but ended up getting another farm, and the farm that, when I interviewed him, that house that they were on, their home had been burned twice, and they continued to rebuild. But it was, you know, conducting those interviews. I was a student at the Ohio State at the time in Columbus, and most of the interviews were about an hour or two, in some cases 3 hours away from Columbus. And so on the road back from the interviews, nothing but tears, just streaming, because I was sad for them. And not only that, I was just frustrated because no one even heard these stories. No one even knew of their, the exemplary way in which, you know, they went to work hard, put a down payment. Some of the people talk about this in the film, how they put a down payment and eventually moved on to the farm. But I heard these stories of how hard these people had to work. Ms. Isafine tells the story about the woman that's 109. Her father, when they would take the cotton and they would say you didn't get anything, he would have to go out, and a lot of black landowners did this. They would chop trees and they would make them into the railroad planks, and then they would sell them to the railroad. And so that's what he was able to do, take the wood from his land, chop it down and even it out and sell it to the railroad. So there were all kinds of ways in which black folks put their money together to get land. But, you know, inevitably, and we went from about 16 million acres in 1920 to about 2.5 million acres right now that's owned by black farmers and black farm families. And so unfortunately, although the numbers will kind of fool you, because I was just looking at the 2022 census, and it was 44,000 farmers, and it was an increase of, I think, 10% from the 5-year prior. But the number, these were people who, like, when they check what's your occupation, but when you look at who owns the land, we lost land. So we keep losing land. So farmers keep going to the land, either leasing land or, you know, urban farmers. A lot of the new numbers for the census are a lot of new urban farmers, because all you have to do is sell $1,000 worth of produce, and you're considered a farm. So, but yeah, it's continuous, and it's unfortunate with, you know, we see it now, and we call it gentrification. In the urban communities where, you know, families have had land for 2 and 3 generations, and you know, someone next door may sell the land and a developer comes in, a tax base goes up, and you have an elder that's been in her home for 2 and 3 generations at 70 and 80 and can't pay the taxes now. And so eventually there's more, sort of the whole cycle, you know, of losing land. And so the next one house goes, and then the next house, and pretty soon the whole community has changed.
Yes. Yeah. I want to say there's probably quite a few people here that have been grown up on a farm or was part of a sharecropper. Do you want to stand and all the people who grew up on farms? Yeah. Oh, we'll wait. Go ahead. All right.
But you know, you all really, the farmers, the families that hold up our farmers, that was so important for me to make this film because I wanted us to see how we survived. No one knew. They said, well, how did they make it? We made it off of love. Mm-hmm. Now, when I went in the field, there was a couple other stories that I could have told. There was a story, for example, Dorothy Scarborough that talks about running to school, her mom putting the clothes in the cotton sack, and the father didn't know. The story that she tells that's not on the film is that the father, when he would come home at the end of his day, he would weep because he couldn't protect his children. And he would say to them, I'm so sorry. I'm afraid of what he would do to you, and I'm afraid of what he would do to us. So we didn't have a lot of options. But in spite of that, Alvin Stepp talks about it was like a tight-knit community. It was like everybody was everybody's children, right? Nobody, if you got in trouble at one home, you got chastised at that home, and then when you got home, you got chastised again. I remember that. I remember growing up in a very tight-knit community, getting in trouble in school. By the time if I did something in school, my mom would know, my grandmother would know, my uncle would know, and you were like, who's calling who? But it was a tight-knit community because the teachers went to our church, and they lived on our block. So we were in an infrastructure, a tight-knit, what we call infrastructure. Yeah. We had a community infrastructure. And so we looked out for each other. And what happened again with the losing one farm, you know, when the black community, and I would say part of it started, you know, we see the dismantling, unfortunately, post-integration. But when we began to lose our all-black schools and all-black teachers and the ways in which we had grocery stores and drug stores, we lost the infrastructure. Yes. And so that began to really kind of fray at the edge of our communities, and in many ways, we're still losing. You know, the thread is still unraveling because we don't have our land. That's why it's so important for folks that have land. If you have your family's land, don't sell it, please. Plead with you. That's land that folks have worked hard for, and when we lose that land, we're not going to get land back. And so there's a sense of sovereignty. Why it was so important for communities to own land is because it was independence. It was, I can decide to do what I want to do, like Mr. Joe Thompson says. He couldn't keep a job. He didn't want it. He wanted his own farm. And I was just in North Carolina, we were screening, and he was on a panel with me. And he said to the audience, this is what he's in his 80s now. He says, this is what I'm going to be doing the day I die. You know, he loves the land, he loves the independence. But there's a sense of freedom, and having been enslaved, when you're able to access something that's going to ensure your freedom and the next generation, that you do what you need to do to get the land and take care of it. But the story I wanted to tell that was so important was that we survived out of love. We survived out of love. There was a lot of trauma, a lot of loss, and a lot of things that I know a lot of folks would probably rather forget. But at the end of the day, nobody was hungry. Mm-hmm. And so the nurturing, the food, was part of the love. And you see that, you know, in our community today. Go visit someone, like, what do you want to eat? You know, feeding was like love, right? We didn't have a lot of money, but we had food. And as the farmers say, we had some good cooks. We had some good cooks.
So I'd like to know if there's anyone in the audience that has any questions.
So we'll have microphones on both sides of the room so that we're able to capture this recording.
First of all, I want to say thank you for making this film. More recently, I started thinking about my food. and being concerned about all of the mess that goes into the food. And even though I go to Whole Foods, most of what I'm seeing there isn't even healthy. It's like, it's been so processed now. So with, I'm in DC, by the way. So when you're trying to find places to even get to the farmers, it's like what this movie made me think about was, why can't we, the community, just pay the farmers so that they could grow our foods, so that we don't have to go through these markets that's not even giving us good stuff anyway. And I'm sure they're ripping off the farmers who are trying to get the stuff to us. How do we create a connection to the farmers so that we can actually get them to grow our foods?
Great question. That's the importance of patronizing a farmer's market. Every time I see a farmer's market, I go. So the process for a farmer to get the product from the field onto the truck to a community, there's some steps. And it used to be back in the day that, because I remember growing up in Florida, that the farmers would come through with the food on their truck, they would ring a bell, and they even accepted EBT. So the process of getting to community was a lot easier. And for a lot of reasons now, we've got safety kind of protocol. So, farmers have to get a permit for this, and they got to get a permit for that. And that's all well and fine, we need to do that. But it's not as easy as it used to be. So finding out which organizations support Black farmers or support farmers, finding out if there's churches in the area that support farmers, and then oftentimes you can do a Google search, see if there's a Black farmer, an Asian farmer, Latino farmer in your area. Call, or if they got a website, and say, can I come and pick? Some farmers have a you pick situation. So those are more informal ways, but there are actually coalitions and farmer market organizations that you can support. Organizations like ours, Farms to Grow, which is a Black-led organization, and our work is primarily with farmers. You saw our sign in the film, the Freedom Farmers Market. We actually have a farmers market, and it's just really important to, at this point, it's just my sort of area of expertise is like Black farmers. But as Black farmers more and more disappear and lose their land, I basically just support all farmers markets, because what's going to happen, eventually all farmers are going to lose land. So it's really important, and I used to go to these conferences and would do my papers on Black farmers, and nobody would say anything. And then I went to a conference, it was a maritime conference, and the fisheries, the fish farmers were saying Costco and Walmart had taken all their quotas and now they can't fish. And so I got up and I said, when we were asking you to say Black farmers, we was like, patronize a Black farmer, support a Black farmer. Nobody was hearing that. And now that you all are losing, now you all want to come and so there is, certainly the validity to support all, but now, all farmers are suffering. And that's because of the global development and the global food system. But that's ideally, that's the freshest way. Because to your point about Whole Foods, I was in there recently actually, and they still got seedless everything, seedless grapes. You cannot find, I just want a seeded grape. You can find a seeded grape. And the more and more, and that's, part of where the market is going, with the intention to make sure that we can't save seeds, and we always have to go back to the master seed producer to grow our food. So I also encourage everybody, if you've got a farm, if you got some land or a garden, grow your own and save your seeds. There was a time that, and this happened I guess about 12 years ago, when the seed companies, GMO companies, were buying up organic seed companies. And so, now there are fewer organic seed companies. However, there's a seed company called Ujema Seed Collective. So this is, in an answer to that, it's a seed company of growers of color, and they are getting farmers to grow old seeds or legacy seeds or heirloom seeds or heritage seeds of things, so that we have our seeds and that they're grown by our farmers or small farmers around the world.
Like, I didn't understand the importance of that until now. My dad took up half our yard and had a garden. I'm sorry. My dad took up half our yard
as a kid and had a garden. He's out of Shibuya, Mississippi. But in Washington, D.C., he grew things in that backyard that wasn't supposed to grow in D.C. And I didn't understand why people would marvel at an orange tree in his backyard. My dad had an orange tree. My dad had a pear tree. I mean, my pears, orange, apples, grapes, watermelon, corn, everything was growing in that backyard. And they're like, an orange tree? You can't grow oranges in D.C. But we used to eat from that backyard. And so I got heirloom seeds that are on my possession now, and I'm going, I gotta get a land to plant my seeds and start growing my food. But I didn't even really, didn't sink in as much as it's sinking in just now watching this. You just don't know. This has really just changed my whole way of thinking, because I'm worried about what's happening in the stores, but I can start making a difference in my own garden. And so this is really powerful. Thank you again.
Absolutely, and encourage your neighbors and share with your friends. I mean, it is important to, to eat local and fresh, but it's also a health outcome. When you're eating closer to the maturation of a seed, of a fruit, you're getting the maximum amount of nutrition. When you go and you get an orange that's green or something, it's 50% of the nutrition. There was a study it's years ago, and they were talking about how apples, for example, are less nutritious than they were because they're not being harvested at a time that's ripeness. And so we're not even getting the nutrition, ideally, that we used to, because they're ripening on a truck, they're ripening in the store. So it's really important that if you're growing your own, pick that fruit when it's ready to eat, and that's how we know that we're going to get healthy. Let me go back to a point you said about your father. One of the things that I've learned from black farmers too is why anything will grow in places, well, a lot of things will grow in places that other people say, how'd you all grow that, is the soil. Black farmers and other natural farmers, not just black farmers, but a lot of indigenous farmers, they make sure that soil is good. And when you got a healthy soil and you got some sun, you can grow anything, and moisture. So that's the other thing, is how I've noticed that black farmers they take care of the earth. They don't want to pollute, they don't want to contaminate. Everybody's composting, sharing with neighbors. I mean, it's just a whole sort of a cycle of support. Like, we're taking care of each other and we're taking care of the earth. And that piece is missing because we're dealing with climate, although, the hurricanes, that's more like, the weather from the melting of the glaciers. But if we're not able to take care of this land, we're going to lose that too. So that's incumbent for all the growers, the people that, hands in the land, we know the importance of it. But to be able to get other people to understand that's why you should eat organic. Don't eat contaminated food. You're contaminating your food, you're contaminating the soil and your body, right? So it's kind of simplistic, really, if we just get back to nature. And I think our ancestors understood the importance of that.
I'd like to talk with you about something. It's more of a statement, but there is a question at the end. I am a descendant, not from the farmers group here. Some of my people were Monacan. Some of my people were indigenous African to this land. And that is something we do not talk about enough. And I've been carrying that story to everyone that will listen, And I am with the League of Enslaved Descendants from Mount Vernon and Arlington House, because my ancestor, Caroline Branham, was what they would call a personal maid to Martha Washington. But, my name, I talk about Caroline so much I forget I have one, I think. No, my name is Zunny Miller Matama. Okay, so many things that you said have touched me. And one of the things that I really believe we need to do is to find a way back to each other. Now, I know that integration separated us. We spread all over, and customs and habits and traditions changed. Children moved away from their parents, and no longer do you have that. What you said just struck me. You're right. When my grandmother was sick, the house was full. That's not going to happen anymore. It's not happening. If I get sick, maybe somebody, one of my children, if they live nearby, they might come. Or if they do try to come, they have to travel, a little bit. It's not the same at all. But I guess what I want to talk about are the children, because we do need to find a way to teach them what you have seen or what you show us in that film. And that's something I'm interested in doing. And I guess I want to ask you, how do you see that happening? Because I know that the first time I realized we were not eating fresh food was when I went to Africa. And I noticed we were waiting there at this restaurant on the side, the cliff of a volcano. And it was very nice, but it was an hour and a half. We still hadn't gotten the food. And I just made a joke to everybody that I was there with. I said, they must be killing the chickens and then cooking it. So I decided to walk up the steps, back up, and look in the kitchen. And when I looked in there, bless God, that's exactly what they were doing. And when I tasted it, I said, this is not what we eat at the, giant food, Safeway. This is not it. This is not it. That was so good, I just couldn't even believe it. And I know my grandfather, who definitely was a Choctaw, and he, from Mississippi. And I know for sure that, he took care of everything, grew everything, and birds and everybody else would just come and land on his shoulder. So, there's a way of, who was the young man I saw lying down out there? You. Lying down on the ground, because that's just it. Some people have this relationship with the earth, and that's what we've got to have, and that's what we've got to teach our children. What do you suggest? How can I get back in touch with you and find out how to get something like that going? I now live in Hagerstown, Maryland. Okay. So, but I'm from DC though. Just want you to know. So okay. All right. So just want to know, how can we do something like that? Where do we start? Wow. Because the schools, I'm sure, not, because the plan is to take all of the land from black farmers. So I know that's the plan.
Let me share.
From all farmers now.
Yeah.
Well, that's terrible, but okay, thank you.
Yeah. I'll share with you what we did at Farms to Grow in a school in San Francisco. We actually we have a Gardens to Grow program, and we put in, or we implemented a garden at an elementary school, after school program, and a Head Start. And so we were fortunate enough to work with the San Francisco Children's Commission to get a grant to grow food. We worked with the youth. They did a tasting, they were out in the garden, and then we worked with their parents and grandparents in the garden to grow food so that they could cook the food at home that the youth were growing. And so it was we were trying to, catch the eaters and the cookers and the growers. And so that program lasted 5 years. We got a lot of success out of it. We got a young lady that I met in 3rd grade. She got back in touch with us when she was a senior, and she was going to school to be agriculture. So that influenced her. So the way you do it is just, we were invited to this particular elementary school to do the garden. But as we were doing the garden, the principal came to us. I was leaving the school one day and she said, can you help me with something? I said, sure. She says, well, the third grade, went up to third grade. She says, I want to, back in, we would sit in the kitchen and with grandmamas and aunties. I want to have that experience for my girls. So we did that. So we had from 12 to 1, we started from in January to the May, the end of the semester, 12 to 1, every Thursday working with the girls. The fourth year I was leaving, and a boy comes up to me and he says, why can't boys cook? So I went back to the principal. I said, this young boy, he comes to me and he wants to know why they can't cook. And she said, okay, well, let's try it. So first we tried it with the girls and the boys. That did not happen. That did not work. That does not work. So we did, 1 week we did the girls, 1 week we did the boys. And what we found out is that it really, I know the girls were excited about it, but the boys got motivated too. They learned how to crack an egg. They learned how to measure. So if it was something that said you needed a cup of something, we never gave them a cup. We gave them a half a cup or a third of a cup. And so they had to work together to do the measurements. And they had to cook, and they would encourage their parents to buy certain things from the grocery store. I remember one student says, I had asked my mom to buy this, and she says, no, we can't afford that. But in working directly with the young people and just as part of the community, because we were in that community, and so we showed them that we hadn't forgotten and that we put a lot of effort into teaching them how to grow the food and teaching them how to cook the food. So that's basically, it's just and we didn't get paid for that. So we got paid for the garden class. We didn't get paid for the cooking class. We did that because the principal said, Gail, can you help us with that? And so a lot of times you just, you put yourself out there, and we had that, the cooking program we had for 5 years. And then when the kids had a school assembly, they wanted to have a cooking show, so they made their own camera, and it was amazing. But basically just being in the community and showing the children that you're with them. So that's just one example, but I'm sure there are other examples from working with people that have farms. Like we have the Barker family. You saw the 6 young people, maybe 7 young people that were coming out of the field. Well, we work with them and supporting them to get stipends for the summer. So they can actually get paid by working on the farm in the summer. So it's got to be incentivized. It's got to be, you're hard into it. And a lot of times we just have to step out on faith and just say, can I come out? Can I come and help? Right? So many times people are, looking for people that they want to get paid. A lot of this work it's not paid work. It's paid, in the satisfaction, right? It's paid in watching young people grow up and saying, I remember when he was 5 and 6 and now, he's 15 and applying for college. So it's an investment, really. It's a lot of investment. And I'll give you my information because I'm in DC too. I just got to DC.
Am I going? Part of what you shared in the story was how everybody brought something to the table. And I see that as even how we can almost barter and work in here about just I grow this, I do this, but even in whatever the situation is, if we learn to barter again, if we come back to that place of, I have this, you have that, I need this, let's swap.
That's right.
That way it just builds for a stronger society, but everybody's needs get met, so it's like we really got to get back to that.
That is so true.
Okay, that's okay. She cut in. That's all right. Dr. Myers, I'm Alicia Cohen. And so I grew up around some farms. My grandparents were town people.
Okay.
It's like in a family of 7, 3 or 4 will farm, and 3 or 4 will go off and do something else. But I could always go back to an uncle that had a fairly large farm. And when I was young, I don't know, I was half listening, but not supposed to be in the conversation. But farmers are always talking about how they need to borrow. They're always talking about how they've been cheated by the agriculture department. I mean, this is the conversation you would think, is it on? Yeah. You would think they might be talking about how do I grow the best corn, no. To survive, they need to know how they have cash money coming in. And so when I was young, I didn't pay a lot of attention to that. I just thought, oh. But as I got older, I realized the Department of Agriculture is our Department of Agriculture. We put taxes to run the Department of Agriculture. And if they're not playing fair, which they haven't, based on my experience, they've never played fair, okay? There's stories, the guy who has the National Black Farmers Association.
John Boyd.
Yes. He always tells the story of how he put in for a loan. He turned his back, and the loan officer put his application in the trash. Yep. And that is how they operated. And he's not the only one. I mean, I've heard it in our family. And so I'm really saying to everyone who's sitting here, you don't have to be a farmer to support farmers financially, to press, to advocate, to protect them. You don't have to have a farm to do that. And so when you see farmers like the National Farmers Association that ask you to advocate for them, I'm just saying, please do. And one other thing, Dr. Myers, and maybe you're aware of this, there are a lot of farmers out there making money, but not growing.
Right, yeah.
And I went through a county, there were Virginia counties coming up from the Outer Banks. They had beautiful homes. They had a lot of land. They didn't have to farm it. So my son-in-law asked someone, wow, we're in this really rural area. How do people afford these homes? And the answer from one of the guys was, they don't have to farm it. They're getting paid for not farming.
Yeah, yeah.
So there are a lot of things and a lot of programs in the Department of Agriculture, hundreds of programs that we lack access to information. We don't get correct information. We are blocked from getting information. And when we apply, they throw the application in the bin.
Yes.
So based on your experience, what's your suggestion to farmers? I'm not farming, but I mean, you work and you're in contact with them to get that information so they can get access to millions of dollars. We talk about millions of land acres, but I'm talking about millions of dollars that are in the Department of Agriculture that we are not accessing.
Right. Wow. Where do I start? In this film, Alvin Stepp talks about the discrimination and how he has been blackballed. Well, he was the farmer that tried to sue Arkansas. He tried to sue Arkansas, the Ag Department of Arkansas, when Bill Clinton was governor. And because his case was denied, and he tells he didn't shred his paper. He was a cross country. In addition to working on the farm, he also was a truck driver. So he would go across, but he kept his immaculate record. So he had a storage and he kept all of his papers. So while they were shredding the complaints of a lot of other farmers, he had his. So when they were trying to file that suit, it was when Clinton was president. And the farmers came and they said, we want to file this suit. He says, wait a minute, we can't see, we don't have any paperwork. And Clinton knew Alvin Stepp's family and said, no, you go down to Arkansas and look for this skinny black dude named Alvin. And so Alvin, they found Alvin. Actually, Alvin went to look for a lawyer, and he tells a story in the film. Well, it's not in the footage, but he tells a story about he went to look for a lawyer, and they said, are you Alvin Stepp? And they said, yes. He said, you Alvin Stepp? Well, anyway, he didn't know that they were looking for him. He had the papers, and they were able to move forward with the Pickford. But his story, basically, he was sitting by the door. He went to the USDA, the FSA local county office, and heard them say, we are going to give this money to this white farmer to save the white farmers, because just like the price, I don't say price fixing, but the global price structure, the USDA basically determined what a price was for something. So during the 70s, U.S. ag, cotton, a lot of our ag prices were low, so all farmers were losing money. So the Arkansas office said, well, we're going to save these white farmers, but they took the money from the black farmers. And so that's how Alvin ended up losing his land. But so he just actually heard them talk that. He heard them through the door. But when the farmers testified through the USDA, the average white farmer application might take 60 days. For black farmers, it was 233 days, if they even processed it. Most times they would tear it up, and even in their face. Because the farmers, it was a white supremacy. The farmers, what were they going to do? And it was still middle of lynching. Like a lot of black folks left the South, because of that. And so they weren't too likely to make much of a fuss, and eventually that's what the Pickford was. So that's the Pickford versus Glickman. It has been years, since the 80s, of the USDA discriminating against black farmers. And so eventually a class action suit, and they did sue. But I will say to the point about what I'm really impressed with the Biden administration, and this was through John Boyd's action. About a year ago, you all remember the farmers were trying to get $4 billion loan forgiveness, and the farmers in Nebraska saying, no, why are black farmers getting this? So they squashed it. So what Biden did is he went ahead, and I think it was $4 billion, but I know a farmer in California that got $200,000 who lost his land. And so he actually went ahead, I don't know if it was executive order, but it was something, discrimination fund that Biden basically paid these black farmers. That really was unheard of. And so that kind of went under the radar because they didn't want to make a fuss because, there would be some kind of retaliation. But yeah, the United States Department of Agriculture, they admitted that they were the last plantation. They actually said that we were the last plantation.
That was a joke that was around last month.
Well, I like to ask,
Yes, ma'am.
so if the farmers are being paid not to farm, right, then what happens to the ones who decide to farm anyway?
Yeah,
It sounds like their land gets taken.
Yeah, well, the quote, so the tobacco, it was a big tobacco farmers, when the price of tobacco went down, they were paying them to not farm. And so that's the price control. But even if you farm, there would be no one to buy your tobacco in this particular case. So that's why they were paying them not to farm. They actually, the most recent one was dairy farmers. They were paying dairy farmers that was pouring out milk.
And that's not about black or white.
No,
it's
no.
just about farming.
Yep, the global structure, the USDA or the United States agricultural policies that price. So it's really a global pricing structure, right? How much they doing in China? What are they doing over there in India? So that's how they price the pounds of cotton and all of that stuff.
So what I hear is that we need to come together, people.
Yes.
One more question. Thank you so much for the story. It had me over there crying thinking about my ancestors, my great grandma. I'm like, how wonderful. I know this is one of the relatives, and I know she has something to say. But quick question, Miss Dr. Myers. Just a short thing about how do I go back to South Carolina, Lynchburg, and find out and get my story in a volume 1, 2, 3, or whatever the next one is.
You know, start with the family. You know, when I went into the field to do these stories, I had been talking to farmers since '97, and I only intended to interview about 10 farmers, because those are the names that I had. And then inevitably, when I got out there, someone would say, you got to talk to this person. So some of the people in the film that didn't look completely dressed for an interview, those were people that says, Gail, you got to come over. My neighbor is over here. She's farming. Can you come talk to her? So I had a whole bunch of those episodes and situations, which was great. But the whole community of farming, people are really supportive of each other. They make sure that if someone is in need of something. So you're in families in Lynchburg, Virginia?
No,
South Carolina. So a lot of times people will interview your close family members. So find out who is the eldest. That's where the information is coming. That's why it was so important to get the eldest person. Find out who's the eldest person in the family, and if you can have a conversation with them, make a recorder, take a camera, a notebook or anything. Just start recording as much as they can. And then you go and you do research. You can go to the library, you can go to, the Mormon Temple. They have done an incredible amount of research on descendants. They have the best library. Then there is a military archive as well. So you can go to research. You can start with, one relative, and they say, well, I don't know. Then you go to an archive, Ancestry.com, and then you can piece together and just keep going back. And then some of that will tell you land, areas in which they were actually on particular land at certain periods. Because I found that out with one of my my great aunt is in that film, Aunt Rose. And so when I started researching, she was telling me stories about her father, Hezekiah. There's a military archive, and then that's when I went to the Mormon archive. But start with Ancestry.com. Yeah.
We have time for Roland. Did you have a question?
Well, I was just going to make a comment that my family, our farm outside of Charlotte, North Carolina, on the Catawba River, right off the Catawba River, this is year 114.
Wow.
So that it's been in the family, but Black Angus cows, pretty much cattle. But I was made aware my sophomore year in college, 1977, that two uncles were cheated out of USDA loans, low interest loans, because right adjoining our property is one of the largest dairy farmers in North Carolina, and even today they get 60% of the USDA funding in the state. Yeah. So. But I was going to say, on the positive side, I've been a part of teams that have earned USDA grants from the Rural Business Development Grant Program and from the Distance Learning Telemedicine Program. So for those in North Carolina and Virginia, the state directors are African American for USDA. So go look them up, talk to them, apply. We just applied this year for a DLT grant for Indian Woods, which is a historical project in eastern North Carolina led by Dr. Arwen Smallwood at North Carolina Central, formerly at A&T. So we're waiting for that. We're waiting for the feedback on that. But these programs are undersubscribed. And when I say undersubscribed, clearly undersubscribed by African Americans and Native Americans. So go after those. Go. I think we need to be knocking on the door aggressively to catch the attention.
And that's part of my thing is access to all these programs that exist out there. Now, Virginia State is our state, like the land grants and the farms. Virginia State and Petersburg, I think they're one of the leading representatives that disseminates this information. So we're not in close proximity to that, but they are the central location, just like A&T in North Carolina, and UDC, but I'm not even a farmer, and I know that. So I'm just saying, any information you've learned here today from Dr. Myers or whatever, if you have relatives who are in the farming business, or you plan to do it, then access the information.
Yes. And make the,
Oh, no, I just want to say thank you again for this important work. It's very important, and me descending from farmers, it was gives us a lot to think about and a lot to act on. So thank you very much.
I do want to add to
Dr. Mark, do you have time for one more question?
I do, but I want to also implore everybody to hold your USDA folks' foot to the fire. You know, the extension, usually they're through land grants. You got your county extension. Most land grants, not all, have a small farm program, and their job is to reach out to small farmers. So they ought to know where small farmers are. If you want to say, I want to, you know, get some fresh eggs, can you help me find a black farmer or whoever? And so that's their job, is to be responsive to the people and let them know. And, you know, the other thing is, because they kind of been operating without a lot of accountability, we need to let them know that we're watching. And we're calling and we're writing letters, and we'll be back. I'm coming next Wednesday, so save that.
And we're on Facebook.
Can you hear me? Yes, here. Okay, Dr. Gales.
Hi, it's good to
Hello,
see you.
good to see you. Thank you for coming. This is the second time that I see your presentation, your movie, and it's great.
Thank you.
I am Beth Sastre. I'm the commercial horticulturist for Virginia Corporate Extension here in Loudoun County, so I'm the extension agent. And one of the things that I see with farmers, any type of farmers, is it's hard for them to apply for grants because they don't have the time to write the grant.
Yes.
However, in RCS, they are helping some people and farm a credit. So reach out to them to help you write the grant. That is not my job, but they are helping farmers here in Loudoun County and farm credit. So NRCS can give you all the type of grants that we have, and it's a lot of money still there because not many farmers apply because of the time, that consuming time that they have to put to write one grant. But farm credit is helping. I'm aware that it's helping some farmers to write grants. So please reach out to them. You can reach out to me as well, of course, for always. But I think that is one of the biggest problems that I see with farmers applying for grants, writing them.
Thanks, Ben.
So thank you, Dr. Myers. Thank you for making that important film and being here today. Thank you.
Yeah, it's an honor. Yes.
Thank you again. I enjoyed it. It's been a bit. Oh my goodness. So glad to have you. Family.